UFC Fight Night, Allen versus Craig, full card predictions. Starting at the bottom, making my way to the top, as always. First fight of the night is Charles Johnson versus Rafael Esteban. Esteban missed weight. He weighed in at 128 pounds. This is a catch weight, therefore, because Johnson did make the weight. He's 32 years old, a little bit older in this matchup, but I'm actually going to take Johnson to win here. The thing with Esteban that I don't like is the fact that one, he missed weight. He had weight cutting issues in his previous fight that he was supposed to have as well. And I think Johnson fought a pretty good level of UFC competition. Esteban, I'm not saying I don't really like his striking. I don't know how his striking is going to look against a guy like Charles Johnson, who actually is pretty solid on the feet, can put combinations together, can put a little bit of power on his punches too. Beat up Jimmy Flick a few fights ago. I know his last two didn't, the Ode Osborne split loss, and then he got dominated by Cody Durden. But Durden is a top 15 level guy. So is Makayev. And I feel like for Esteban, making his debut here, he is 11-0 undefeated. So I understand why people would pick him to win. But I just feel like against Johnson, he's not going to have better cardio, in my opinion. I don't think he's going to be able to just hold Johnson down. Johnson was trying to work his way back to his feet against Makayev. And I think Makayev's a better wrestler, a better fighter overall than a guy like Esteban. So I do think Johnson, if he's on his game, I know he didn't really look great in the Ode Osborne fight, but he did look really good in the Jimmy Flick fight. If he can get his output, if he has good enough output here, if he has more volume, I think he can definitely win this fight, and he's an underdog. So I'm going to take Charles Johnson to win. It is a little bit dangerous. Esteban did have a ground and pound finish in his last fight, but that was a year ago on the Contender Series. He's got to prove himself. In my opinion, he's got to prove himself in the UFC before I can, have any confidence in picking him against a decent level UFC fighter. Moving right along, we have Nicholas Moda versus Trey Ogden. Um, I'm going to go with Moda here over Trey Ogden. Trey Ogden, he's not the best striker. I mean, he is a decent point fighter on the feet, which is what he's going to probably try to do here. He has no knockouts on his entire record, so he's never knocked anybody out. The difference, though, with Moda is Moda does have a lot of power. He does have finishing ability. However, he has been knocked out a few times. In his two UFC losses, they're both by knockout against Jim Miller and Manuel Torres. And that Torres loss was a brutal, brutal knockout. Just caught him with an elbow, flush right on the chin, just dropped him, put him out cold. Same thing with the Jim Miller fight, slumped him. The thing with Trey Ogden, though, as I mentioned, he has 0 knockouts on his record. He did beat Daniel Zellhuber. I feel like that's the reason a lot of people are picking him here. But if he doesn't get the grappling going, if this stays on the feet, I do like Moda's ability to find the chin of Ogden or just land the more powerful punches in route to a decision. So and I'm going to go with Moda just because I feel like his striking is better. I feel like he's got more power. And if he lands on the feet, he can do some serious damage compared to Ogden, who hasn't shown to do much damage at all. Kind of just, picks his way, kind of tries to pick his guy apart. Not pick him apart as far as, putting a lot of damage on him, just picking him apart, landing some, more total strikes than the other guy, than your opponent. That's what Ogden wants to do. I don't think Mata is going to give him a chance to do that. So I'm going to go with Nicholas Moda to get this one done. Next is Lucy Pudilova and Aylin Perez. This card is going to be rough. I can already tell. But the reason I say that is because I'm picking quite a few underdogs on this card. I think this card is littered with a ton of different potential dogs, and I think this is a potential dog spot here. Lucy Pudilova, they're the same age. Aylin Perez, Pudilova, same age, 29 years old. Aylin Perez is 8-2 versus 14-8 Pudilova. Perez, though, is a minus 190 favorite over Lucy Pudilova. I understand it's because of her last fight, but she beat Ashley Evans Smith. Out grappling Ashley Evans Smith is seriously, that's not really impressive at the slightest. Ashley Evans Smith's terrible. She's a 50-50 fighter, 6-6. So dominating her in the grappling, it's not really. It doesn't. It leaves a lot to be desired. She got beat by Stephanie Edgar. Edgar, submitted her, out grappled her in that fight. She had her moments, but still lost to Edgar. I think Lucy Pudilova. The fact is, she's training out of SBG Ireland, so her grappling is getting better. I think Aylin Perez doesn't really have much striking. I feel like people are just thinking that Perez is just gonna, take down Pudilova and submit her easily, just make her look, completely useless on the mat. I don't know if I see that happening. I could. This is a low level fight, and for how low level this is, I'll take the experience advantage of Pudilova. And if she can stop the takedowns or even get her own takedowns, I think it'll be a bad night for Perez. I think she's being overrated so much in this spot, almost a 2-1 favorite. She hasn't really shown, like, in my opinion, she hasn't shown how she's a 2-1 favorite in this fight. Beating Ashley Evans Smith isn't impressive, so until she shows that, I'm not going to be able to, you know, uh, count on her as a heavy favorite. So, um, yeah, I'm going with Lucy Pudilova as the underdog here. Next one, now we start to get in the ones that are like, all right, Lucas Alexander, Jekka Sergi. Jekka's a terrible fighter. To tell you guys the truth, he's a bad fighter. Alexander missed weight, which is why this is 148 pounds. So these guys, I mean, I still think Alexander wins, regardless of any weight miss or whatever. Sergi sucks. He lost to Anshul Jubilee. Anshul Jubilee, that fight was just an absolute embarrassment against Mike Breeden. I thought Jubilee was, I thought he should have won that fight against Breeden. I was thinking to myself, like, Jubilee, he should win. Breeden's not a very good fighter. And what does he do? He goes out there and gets picked apart in the third round and loses. That doesn't have much to do with this fight, but the only reason I'm saying that is because Jekka, he did lose to Anshul Jubilee. Jubilee finished him, took him down with ease, made it look easy. Alexander, I think he'll just outstrike Jekka for 3 rounds or find a finish. One of the two. I could just see him outstriking him for 3 rounds. Jekka's not good. He's not UFC caliber. They're the same age. I don't understand how you can lose to Anshul Jubilee, a guy that lost to Mike Breeden. I know it's MMA math, but the guy's not a good fighter. Alexander training out of a better gym, Fusion Excel. Yeah, I think the price tag minus 530. It's very very it's lopsided. The odds makers think Lucas Alexander is going to dominate this fight, or the people betting on this fight think Alexander is going to dominate this fight. And I tend to agree. Outside of like a Hail Mary shot, overhand or something from Jekka, I don't see him winning. I think Alexander should win this fight majority of the time. So I am going to pick him to win. Mick Parkin and Caio Machado. Another one. I'm going with Mick Parkin. Machado sucks. Um, his Contender Series fight was just awful, man. It was terrible. Kevin Saflarski, it was just an awful, awful fight. A lot of them holding each other against the cage. There was just, I mean, Machado did have some his punches come from the really wide. I feel like Mick Parkin's a much more technical fighter, which makes sense because he's training with Tom Aspinall and those guys over there, which is a pretty good gym. I mean, I believe there's another guy. Is it a Bellator guy or a KSW guy? I believe that's also training with Parkin and Aspinall as well. I forget his name, but regardless of that, I think Parkin's more technical. He beat Jamal Pogues in his last fight, which is actually a pretty good win for heavyweight. Caio Machado, he has to prove himself in the UFC. It's another one of these prove it spots. There are a few on the card, a few guys that I'm trying to say, you know, if they prove it, then I'm glad to be wrong. But I think Mick Parkin's the far better fighter here. Training with Aspinall. Aspinall just got a huge win. I think this is a kind of a layup fight in all honesty. So definitely going with Mick Parkin to win this one. Christian Leroy Duncan taking on Dennis Tululin on short notice is the next fight. Now, the original fight was going to be Glory Kickboxer. What's his name? It was Cesar Almeida. Cesar Almeida versus Christian Leroy Duncan was supposed to be the fight, and Almeida had to pull out of the fight, unfortunately. I felt like that would have been a very interesting fight. A guy that beat Alex Pereira in kickboxing versus a very, awkward, not awkward, just a different type of striker, and Christian Leroy Duncan. Unorthodox is a good way to describe him, but he is very athletic. He is very good in his striking. Now he's fighting Dennis Tululin. Um, I went from, kind of being 50-50 on it. I was even thinking Almeida, just because if Almeida keeps it on the feet, he probably would, you know, have a lot of success against Duncan. But this is a different fight. Christian Leroy Duncan beats Dennis Tululin. Tululin, he can't grapple. It's simple as that. His grappling is just so bad. And Leroy Duncan's not really known to be a grappler, but even on the feet, I think Leroy Duncan can have success here. The takedowns and the grappling is, the clear path to victory for Duncan. If he wants to keep this on the feet, though, I think CLD can probably win this on the feet. Dennis Tululin will keep coming forward unless you put him away. So he is a tough guy. He's not going to give up on himself, but he's not on this level. Christian Leroy Duncan, his loss to Armin Petrosian, it is what it is. Petrosian's a much better striker and fighter, in my opinion, than Dennis Tululin. Taking this fight on very short notice, I don't even think I really have to go through all of his wins and losses to really kind of make it known why I believe Duncan should win the fight. But yeah, I just think the grappling isn't there for Tululin. I think CLD will be the better striker as well. As long as he doesn't gas out in the third round, as long as he doesn't slow down and give Tululin an opportunity to press the action, I think CLD, if he can control the pace of the fight, I think he wins pretty easily, and he can definitely put the hands on Tululin. So that's the pick there. Chad and Helliger versus Jose Johnson. So Chad, he's about to be 37 years old. I didn't like his fight at all. I mean, he lost to Alatang Haley, which is like not the biggest deal. I mean, Alatang Haley is a decent fighter, but the Jesse Strader fight, I know he won the fight, but he got taken down a few times. He didn't look good in that fight, in my opinion. Jesse Strader is not UFC caliber. He's a regional fighter, regional level fighter, and he had a very competitive fight with Chad up until when he got finished in the third round. I think Jose Johnson, 15-8. It's hard to trust the guy. He's 28 years old, so he has more MMA experience than Chad does. Almost a decade younger, in his prime. I think Chad's not in his prime anymore. He's taken over a year off now. Jose Johnson, I know he got twisted by Damon Blackshear, but Blackshear is, he's a pretty solid fighter himself. So I don't think Chad's going to be able to submit Jose Johnson. And on the feet, I think Johnson does have an advantage in the power, especially. He had a brutal right hand knockout against Delano Perry. That fight was it was like 20 seconds in, just, rocks him, just puts him away with the right hand, sleeps him bad, out cold. And then on the Contender Series, he beats Jack Cartwright. Um, for Johnson, there is the worry about the grappling, but like I said, Chad's not really the best grappler. I think this will probably be mostly playing out on the feet. And if it does play out on the feet, I think Jose Johnson is live for a knockout just because of the power he has. Chad's, getting older, about to be 37. There are more worries on his side, in my opinion, than there are on the Johnson side. For Johnson, the biggest worry, I think, is something that Chad probably won't be doing too much of anyway. So the pick for me is going to be Jose Johnson. Moving along to the featured prelim, this could arguably be on the main card. I think this is a very good fight. It is JSP, Jonathan Pierce versus Joe Anderson, Brito. This one to me is very like, it's a toss up because either Brito gets him out of there, either Brito puts the hands on him and finds the finish, or JSP probably tires out Brito, wears him out, and wins a decision. Those are the likely outcomes, in my opinion. Either JSP gets it done in rounds 2 and 3, or Brito comes out there and puts his lights out early. I'm really kind of 50-50 on what I think is going to happen. Like I said, I'm going to go with Brito just for the fact that he's an underdog here. In a fight that I think is so close, I'm gonna slightly lean with the dog. I think Breed 2 has so much knockout potential over JSP. JSP gets hit clean, and when you get hit clean by certain guys, they're not going to knock you out. Um, but this is by far the most powerful guy that Jonathan Pierce has ever fought. This guy, Breed 2, can put someone's lights out. His only loss in the UFC was against Bill Algeo, and Bill Algeo, he hit Bill Algeo with some big, big shots on the feet. Bill Algeo has an iron chin, ate them all. Just has a complete iron chin, and the guy's fantastic, grappler. Bill Algeo is just a tricky fight for a lot of guys. So is JSP, but I think Bill Algeo is a better striker than JSP. I think Bill Algeo has better movement than JSP on the feet. I think JSP does have better wrestling and better. He can push the pace in the wrestling, but I do think Joe Anderson Brito has such an advantage in the striking, as far as the power, and even he can probably get his own takedowns early in the fight. You know what I mean? JSP, his only UFC loss, if you look back, was the fight against Joe Lozon. It was Joe Lozon, and he lost by ground and pound. Lozon took him down right in the mount and just basically ground and pounded him and finished him. I could see possibly the same, maybe not, Bree2 finishing him with ground and pound, but I could see Bree2 taking him down. Bree2 won on the Contender Series by a decision over Diego Lopez, for those that don't know that as well. So he's got a lot of good wins, as you can see here, beat Diego Lopez. So he has a lot of good wins on his record. I think, the Bill Algeo fight, he has to have learned a lot from that. I think for JSP, just striking, in my opinion, the striking just isn't there. So I am going to go with the slight underdog, Joe Anderson Bree 2, to get it done and find the chin of Pierce. Starting off on the main card, we have Uros Medic versus Myktabek. Myktabek Oralbai. I'm probably pronouncing his name wrong. Tough name to pronounce, to be honest. But I did watch two of his fights. I did watch the last two fights he was in. The Hayward Charles fight, that was not long ago at all. But the truth is, I don't know why this guy's a favorite. I don't know if it's the name. I'm not sure if it's I'm not sure if it's because he's young and 11-1, winning a lot of fights, knocking people out. Maybe that's why he's a favorite. I mean, Uros Medic just came off a win against Matt Semmelsberger, knocks out Matt Semmelsberger, beats Omar Morales, finishes him as well, loses to Jalen Turner, that was 2 years ago, and Jalen Turner's top 15 level guy, or, he is top 15 level, just had a really competitive fight with Dan Hooker. Now, this is at welterweight, I understand that, but Semmelsberger's a big welterweight, and Medic did well against him. Oralbai, you know, I don't think his striking is really that good, in my opinion. I could be wrong, um, based off of what happens here, but his striking just, I know he's knocked guys out. I know his last fight, he had a vicious knockout, an uppercut, right on the chin, knocked the guy clean out. But Uros Medic is a better striker, I believe. The grappling, people could say the grappling, the wrestling, but watching this guy, I did watch, like, even in his fights, I just wasn't impressed with his wrestling either. It wasn't like he was just, you know, hitting guys like blast doubles or taking them down easily. Like, it didn't look that good to me. Um, in my opinion, he just didn't pass the eye test from his regional level tape. Now, sometimes guys get into the UFC and they're really young, like he is. He's only 25, so maybe he gets into the UFC and makes vast improvements. There's definitely a possibility for this guy to be making improvements. There's a possibility that he can be getting better and better. But I just don't understand how Uros Medic is an underdog, unless you think that Earlboy is going to wrestle. But he's coming off of a 2 week layoff it was since his last fight. His last fight was, the end of October, so he's turning right back around on short notice. Is he going to have the wrestling to push a 15-minute grappling pace against Uros Medic? I'm going to say no. I'm going to say he doesn't have a 15-minute pace against this guy, against Uros Medic, who is a pretty good kickboxer in his own right. I think Uros Medic gets it done as an underdog. The line is a little bit disrespectful, but it is what it is. Next fight on the main card is Amanda Ribas versus Luana Pinheiro. I am going to go with Amanda Ribas. I know the record has been a little spotty the last few fights for Amanda Ribas, but if you look at the level of competitions she's been fighting, it has been very good. Marina Rodriguez, Amanda Ribas is very chinny. I think that's the main cause of concern that people see with her is that she's been knocked out a few times. She does have chin problems. Her last fight she got knocked out. She's at 115 though against Luana Pinheiro. Luana Pinheiro is not known to be the biggest knockout puncher. Now, she does have a knockout win on the Contender Series. That was 3 years ago, though. She beat Randa Marcos, Sam Hughes, and then Michelle Waterson Gomez by split. Her competition has not been the greatest, and she hasn't looked, Amanda Ribas has been fighting much, much, much better level. Top 10, actually, if you're really looking into it, top 10 level girls versus Luana Pinheiro not fighting even close to that level of competition. Huge step up. I understand why Ribas is the favorite. Her chin is the only worry for me. I think she's better besides the chin. Besides her getting caught here, she should win the fight absolutely. So Amanda Ribas is going to be the pick to win. Next fight is the Peyton Talbot and Nick Aguirre fight. Slick Nick Aguirre versus Peyton Talbot. I think this line is just ridiculous. I do think Talbot, you know, it's honestly actually like I'm kind of like insanely enough, I'm actually kind of not sold on Peyton Talbot, but I just don't know if I should even consider picking like Nick Aguirre in this one. I'm going to pick Peyton Talbot as the pick, but I mean, plus 525 on Aguirre is like, at that point, I don't know how anyone could put a minus 775, minus 800, putting that into a parlay. The guy's 6-0. He's unproven. You could say Nick Aguirre's unproven, but Nick Aguirre's a plus 525 underdog. So I'm going to pick Talbot to win, but I'm not at all confident in this. If anything, I wouldn't bet on Talbot. I would probably say there's a good amount of value on Aguirre, even if Nick, like, he can get knocked out, in the second or third round after winning the first round. That's definitely a possibility. Like, he could start fast, he could take down Talbot, he can make him work to win this fight. And for me, that's enough for me to be like, okay, I don't think that this line is even close to accurate. Minus 300, I'd say, even like minus 250, minus 300. It's like, all right, maybe there's a lot of striking upside on the Talbot side. If he can stop takedowns, they should be able to beat Aguirre pretty easily. But at this number, it's just ridiculous. It's way overpriced. Unless Peyton, the only way Peyton Talbot covers this line is if he like dominates Nick Aguirre to like a 30-25, or if he finishes him in like the first round. If this is a back and forth competitive fight that Talbot ends up winning, people are going to be sweating holding their Peyton Talbot minus 700 parlays. So yeah, the pick's Talbot. The confidence is not there though, if I'm being honest. Nick Aguirre can grapple. He actually is trained. He's training Valley Flow. He's training with very good guys. Was training also with Yair Rodriguez for Yair's championship fight. He was in that camp. So the dude's getting good looks. His last fight was on short notice and up a weight class. Short notice, up a weight class against Dan Argueta. Yeah, I think for this one, back at his normal weight class, I think this is like, he's being, like I said, Peyton Talbot's a little bit overvalued, but yeah, I'm still going to pick him, but that's minus 800 is just absolutely ridiculous. Speaking of ridiculous, this fight is pretty ridiculous. Jordan Levitt and Chase Hooper. I'm also, this whole card's just a shit show. It's a complete shit show. It's a nightmare to pick because I just know, whatever I do is going to be just really rough on as far as the predictions go. Just give me Levitt. I'm picking Levitt. At this point, it's like, how can I pick Chase Hooper as a minus 220 favorite? The guy's, he leaves his chin wide open to get cracked. And Jordan Levitt, I know everyone's like, he has no power, he has no finishing ability. He does have a little bit of finishing ability. I mean, he slammed, was it Matt Wyman? He slammed on his head. Yeah, it was Matt Wyman back in the day. Slammed him on his head, knocked him out. Victor Martinez in his last fight had him in the clinch, finished him with knees in the clinch. So at the end of the day, Jordan Levitt does have some finishing ability. Chase Hooper, he has a ton of volume and jiu-jitsu. That's what he is. He's mainly a jiu-jitsu fighter, um, but he will pour on the volume in the striking. That basically, he's all offense. He's going to just push the pace, throw a ton of volume, get in your face. For Levitt, I do think Levitt actually, generally speaking, he's not terrible defensively. I do think he might get hit a little bit here by Hooper. He might get caught a few times, but like just the thought of picking Chase Hooper, or even like especially putting money on Chase Hooper at minus 220, it's just flat out wrong in my opinion. Um, let's not forget his last fight. Chase Hooper was an underdog against Nick Fiore, and by the way, I picked Hooper in that fight. I couldn't believe Hooper was an underdog against I was going to say Nick Aguirre again. Nick Fiore, 6-1. Nick Fiore is not UFC level. Fiore's not UFC level at all, not UFC caliber. Hooper destroyed him. Jordan Levitt, you're training at Extreme Couture. I have to imagine you're training out of that gym for a reason, right? Your striking can't be that bad if you're training out of Extreme Couture. You have to have the ability to put some hands on Chase Hooper if you're training out of that gym. Um, I know he's probably not like a sparring partner of Strickland. Strickland's a much bigger guy, but like you look at guys like Sean Strickland in the gym, you look at some of these killers. If you're not at least improving, if you're not at least, your striking's not getting a little bit better, at least good enough to put up a good fight against Chase Hooper, then I don't know what to tell you. I'm going with Levitt. Again, is there really much else to say about Chase Hooper besides the fight against Steve Garcia was just terrible, and Garcia was a big underdog. Garcia was like a 2-1 underdog in that fight. Garcia made it look easy. Chase Hooper, then he's an underdog. Hooper, the underdog against Fiore, I'll never understand that. But now he's a favorite, so I feel like the odds makers, they never get this guy right. You know, he wins as an underdog, but then he loses as a heavy favorite. So are you going to trust him as a heavy favorite? I don't know. I'm not going to. I'm going to pick Levitt. I do think Hooper's got the cardio edge. I think the overall grappling edge in terms of if somebody finds a submission, it's probably going to be Hooper. But I think Levitt has the ability. He could get some control time possibly. I think he's got better wrestling. I think he could get Hooper to the ground if he needs to. And I think the striking, like there is an opportunity for Levitt to catch Hooper. Even when Hooper ducks his head, when he throws a punch and he drops his head way down. If Levitt grabs the back of his head and throws a knee up the middle, he can really hurt Hooper here. So, I am going to go with Levitt as a plus 180 underdog out of Extreme Couture. Both young guys. Hooper, the younger guy, but yeah, I do think Levitt is live in this one. So I know a lot of people are on him. 54% of people are picking him. Yeah, it's worrying. It's a Jordan Levitt fight. You never know what's going to happen. He could just let the ball, like drop the ball completely. But I'm going to take the shot here on the dog. So give me Levitt. Co-main event is Jake Matthews taking on Michael Morales. I am going to go with Michael Morales here. So for Morales, his last fight was against a veteran and Max Payne Griffin, who's, longtime UFC veteran. He went a full 15 with him and, looked pretty good. I mean, competitive fight, won the fight though. Michael Morales, he's been tested over 3 rounds. The common thing I've seen this week from most people, I've seen a lot of people say that, this is like the Gabriel Bonfim and Nicholas Dalby fight. I don't necessarily agree. To be quite honest with you, I don't agree that this is like the Bond theme and Dolby fight because Bonfim had never been tested in the later rounds. Dolby has exceptional cardio and he can push a pace. That's his, that's what he's best at. Dolby's not a great, like, he's not a powerful guy. He's not the best grappler or wrestler. But what he can do is just get in your face and make it a dirty fight and really, push you if you don't have that ability to go 3 hard rounds. We see that Michael Morales can go 3 hard rounds. So I don't see these comparisons, honestly. I just don't think it's accurate. Even if you think Matthews wins the fight, which I'm going with Michael Morales, but even if you think Matthews wins the fight, I just think it's a lazy comparison comparing him to Bonfim because Bonfim, was getting first round submissions over and over, whereas Michael Morales had multiple wins that went late. The Max Griffin fight won over 3 rounds. The Adam Fuggett fight, he beat Adam Fuggett in the third round. He finished him in the third round. So he had some cage time there, beat Trevin Giles. That was a first round win, and then went the distance and won on the Contender Series. So the guy's been the distance, a few times now. It's not like he's only finding first round finishes and he's not tested. The only concern I have with Michael Morales is he's a little bit young. Some of these younger guys, it's a little bit worrying, when they start fighting, um, because Jake Matthews is a good fighter. So once guys like this, like guys like Michael Morales, start to take steps up, it does get a little bit nerve wracking because you're like, all right, is he gonna, pass the test? But I do think he should pass the test here. Jake Matthews won in his last fight against Darius Flowers. The fight before that, Matthew Semmelsberger. Matthew Semmelsberger went in there and completely, he hit him with a few big shots, dropped Matthews, outstruck him, won the fight. Matthews was a big favorite in that fight, dropped the ball big time there. Some of his wins, though, if you look at his wins throughout his career, especially his latest wins in the UFC, they haven't really aged well. I know he has some decent wins. He did beat the Leech way back in 2018, but recently, Darius Flowers, all right, he's kind of a regional level fighter, loses to Semmelsberger, gets dropped a few times in that fight, gets dominated by Sean Brady in the grappling. Sean Brady's good, very good grappler. Andre Fiallo beats him. Fiallo, chinny, not lost 4 fights in a row at this point. Beat Diego Sanchez, who's at the time was 40, 38 years old. On the other side of 38, beat an absolute can. Emil Weber Meek, like, all right. So I think that just goes to show some of his level of competition. I've went through enough fights of this guy. I think Michael Morales is good enough to win the fight. Over Jake Matthews. Jake Matthews, there's a certain level of competition that should be able to beat him. If Michael Morales isn't a complete fraud, he wins this fight. So this will be a fraud check. If Michael Morales loses this fight, he'll never, like, I don't care how young he is, you have to beat Jake Matthews if you consider yourself a serious prospect, in my opinion. So the pick is going to be Michael Morales. I do think he gets it done. More power, stronger guy, natural welterweight. Matthews was a former lightweight. There's a lot of advantages here for Morales. That's going to be my pick. And lastly, we have the main event of the evening, and it is Brendan Allen versus Paul Craig. I'm going with Brendan Allen. Paul Craig pisses me off because he always finds ways to somehow win, and it's always when it's least expected too. Like the last fight, I picked Andre Muniz. I thought that was one of the most confident picks I've had. That was one of the most confident picks I had in a long time. I thought Andre Muniz was going to just run through Paul Craig. Craig was dropping down a weight class. Muniz, I thought, was a much better striker. Not that Muniz had great striking, but I thought it was better than Craig's. I also thought his grappling was good enough to defend anything that Paul Craig had to offer. Little did I know, Andre Muniz failed the test badly. Craig dropped a weight class, still got the better of Muniz and finished him in that fight. Now the difference is Brendan Allen is a much better striker than Muniz. Brendan Allen's better everywhere than a guy like Andre Muniz. And against Paul Craig has to watch out for quite a lot here. not just the power and the striking ability. Because I do think Brendan Allen, although Brendan Allen's hittable, Brendan Allen is he has gotten clipped on the feet. He has gotten dropped a few times, or should I say like he's gotten chin checked a few times. Got beat by Strickland and Chris Curtis, but those guys are very, very good strikers. Paul Craig is not a very good striker. I think Brendan Allen. I think he's better everywhere. I think the only place where Paul Craig is better is pure jiu-jitsu, and even then, Brendan Allen is a very, very he's a good grappler. He's a better grappler than a lot of people really give him credit for. I think I could see a club and sub here. I could see him clubbing and subbing Paul Craig, just to kind of say like just kind of say kind of like an "I told you so" moment. You know, proving to people that he is who he says he is. He is an elite grappler, which I do think he is. I don't think he should play around in Craig's guard. Will he do that? Probably. He probably will enter the guard of Paul Craig. So I am a little bit worried. Paul Craig has submitted a lot of guys: Magomed Ankalaev, Jamal Hill, Andre Muniz. Who else has he subbed? Nikita Krylov. So he's subbed a lot of good competition. But Brendan Allen, he's a much better striker. If you keep this on the feet, Brendan Allen, you should win the fight. Even if this does enter the grappling, as long as you just don't make the same dumb mistakes that everyone else makes, and just I personally wouldn't even go into his guard. The only way Brendan Allen, the only way he should engage in the grappling is if he drops Paul Craig and tries to like jump on him and snatch up a choke or something. But I don't think he should be looking for takedowns here. I think there's a smart game plan, and that's what he should do. Just outstrike him, try to, just put the punches together, and I think he can certainly do that. Much younger fighter coming into his prime, 27 years old, about to be 28, versus the 35, about to be 36-year-old Paul Craig. So I think Brendan Allen's a more well-rounded fighter, younger. I think he's just better overall. So I am going to pick Brendan Allen to win. If you're thinking Paul Craig gets it done, I'm assuming you're thinking it's by sub. I think that's the most likely outcome. Paul Craig throwing up like a. I really do think he has a. He does have a submission chance. He does have a triangle, or like he always has a chance to find something, find a submission and a scramble here as well. But outside of that, I think Brendan Allen gets it done. So that's going to be the pick for me to round out the card. Tough card. I'll be completely honest with you guys. This is in my opinion, it's one of my toughest cards to pick in a long time. Uh, Last card went 8-4. This one, hoping to do, not too far from that. There are some ones where it's a little bit sketchy. The Nicholas Moda, Trey Ogden fight, the Pudilova fight, you don't know what's going to happen there. Charles Johnson and Rafael Esteban, like there's a few 50-50 ones. You got some debuting fighters like Oralby versus a guy like Medic, who I think is more proven at this level. So overall, those are my thoughts on the event. Thank you guys very much for watching, and as always, I will see you in the next one.